Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to the channel. This is the second video of a small series where I talk about few things to know when you want to start building your Eurorack synthesizer, your modular synthesizer. In the previous video I told you about Eurorack cases, so dimensions, power supply. If you didn't watch that video yet, you find the link up here. In this second episode of the series, we're going to talk about something a little bit more complicated, which are oscillators, so the core of a modular synthesizer, because it's the module that generates the sound. And also I want to explain why I consider Platts the best option to start when you start in your modular synthesizer instead of other oscillators. In my modular system, I have two oscillators. The first one is Platts. The second one is a Chemist Tycho. Platts is a multi-oscillator. That means that it's a sort of wavetable oscillators. So you have different models that I can switch with this button or with this button. So it's 8 plus 8 models of sound generators, so it's like having 16 different oscillators in one, but at the same time they are also wavetable oscillators. So it means that when I change the parameters here, I basically completely change the sound. So that's super interesting and that gives you a lot of possibilities. The second oscillator, a Chemist Tycho, it's an FM synthesizer, so you can choose between different waveforms, and each one of these waveforms modulates another set of waveforms. Okay, so also here there are many possibilities. The thing about these two oscillators is that they are way more complex than a basic oscillator, because they both have an internal low-pass gate and an internal decay generator. So it means that they can receive a signal to start letting the sound out when they receive the trigger, and then they can internally stop that sound by closing a filter or by closing the amplitude of the sound. Now let's do a step backward. How do I control modular synthesizer? They can receive voltage. They are controlled through voltage. On modular synthesizer, on the Eurorack standard, the voltage goes from -5 to +5 volts. With that voltage, you control the pitch of your module, and also you send just a signal, gate open, gate close. So it means that you're pressing the key and then you release it, and that's just a fixed voltage that controls the gate input of the module. Let's now consider a very simple oscillator and see why Platts is way more powerful than a simple one and gives you a lot more possibilities, and why it's a module that can be used alone. So you could just start making music with just this module alone. Of course, you need an external controller to send the voltage, or a module to convert your MIDI from the computer to voltage, but we'll talk about this in another time. So to show you that, I will use VCV Rack, which is a software device that you can download for free. So you will have the possibility to try what I do by yourself and learn what I'm telling you. So Rack, or VCV Rack, is a virtual Eurorack synthesizer where most of the modules are for free. There are some emulations of real modules. For example, the Befaco modules are all original, made from Befaco, while the mutable instrument modules are made from a third-party developer, but they are very close to the original one. I don't want to make a tutorial about VCV Rack, but basically you have this MIDI to CV. It's converting the MIDI that you send into virtually controlled voltage to voltage. So you have different outputs from here, and then you have your mixer. So basically you can go inside this with different oscillators, different sounds, and mix them together, and then you have a general level. And then the mix output goes into this virtual module where you select your audio interface just to hear the sound. This is something that you have also only in the digital one. So here I have two different oscillators. The first one is a very simple one. The second one is our emulation of plots. Firstly, I want to show you how a normal oscillator works. So basically you go out with the control on the pitch, which is called voltage per octave, because it means that every voltage that you go up, so for example from 0 to 1 volt, you go up by an octave with the pitch. Okay, so voltage per octave inside voltage per octave input that I have also in my plots, in the real one. And also I have this output called pitch on my Arturia Beatstep Pro to do that. So I could go from here inside voltage per octave input on plots and control the pitch. So when I change the button that I press, the pitch changes. In this case, I'm using Arturia Beatstep Pro just as a MIDI controller to play VCV Rack. In a very simple oscillator, there is no other control, so you don't have a trigger control on the module. So it means that the modules can't receive informations of when you're pressing a button and when you're not. And I'll show you what I mean. So now I go out. As you can see here, I have 4 waveforms on separated outputs. That's basically how normal oscillator works. So I go out with a saw wave, and I go inside my mixer. Now I just raise up the volume and the general level, and that's what I hear. So the frequency knob that you can find in every oscillator, you can see it here as well, and also on the real one here. It's basically your tuner. So you tune your oscillator, telling him, if I press C on my keyboard, I want that module to send out a C. Based on that tuning that I give to my oscillator, when I change the keyboard, when I change the button that I press, it sends a different voltage to my module, and so the pitch change, it changed notes basically. What you can hear now is that I have no control, apart from this manual volume, no control on the sound, so I can't decide when to stop, when the sound stops. I can just change the note. But I can't make the sound stop because this module doesn't have any way to control the output of itself. So what do I need if I want to make this oscillator playable? What do I need to actually be able to make a melody, to make pauses, to make what it takes to make a sound good? Well, you need an ADSR generator, so an envelope generator, or maybe just an attack and decay generator, so a simpler one, and a filter called VCF, because it's a voltage controlled filter, so it's controlled by a voltage, or a VCA, voltage control amplifier. So it's an amplifier, just a volume, which is controlled by a voltage. So let's try with to add the ADSR. Here we go. So you can see I have an attack, a decay, a sustain, and a release. And now I want to add, let's try first with a filter. So here we go. My sound, to be controlled, doesn't have anymore to go directly straight to the output, but I have to go inside the filter, because now I want the sound to pass through the filter will control it, and then I send it out. So input from my saw wave, I go inside the input, and now from my low pass filter, because I want a low pass filter to completely close the filter and stop the sound, I will go out in the mixer. So let's check it now. So as you can see, when I close the filter, I can't hear anymore a sound. But I want something to do this automatically. I don't want to stay there with my hand to open and close the filter. To do that, I need an ADSR, so something that when I press my button, activate a cycle of attack time, decay time, sustain, and release time. So I want something to work for me in order to decide how much it takes the filter to open with the attack time, open full frequency range. Then with the decay time, I decide how much the filter takes to go from the full open to the level of frequency that I decide with the sustain knob of my ADSR. And then with the release time, I decide how much it takes the filter to go from this frequency to full closed when I release the button. So to control this, I have to send a gate signal to my ADSR. The gate signal is the signal, the voltage that tells my ADSR to start the cycle because I pressed my button. Also, if you can see here, I have on every sequencer of the Arturia Beats Pro a gate output. So this is the output to send the signal of when I press the button and when I release it also. So from gate output here, I will go on gate input on the ADSR. Now my ADSR need to control the frequency. So I go from the output of the ADSR to frequency. So the VCF is called voltage control filter because I can control how much the filter is open or closed with a voltage, and that voltage in this case I'm sending it with my ADSR. So as I press the button, you will see this light blink. Let's make them longer. Okay, attack, decay, now sustain. So as you can see, it slowly moved from attack to decay to the sustain because this time is set at a pretty high value. Now I'm keeping pressed the button, so it's on sustain. When I release the button, it will move to the release phase. Here you go. And now the release has finished its time. So what does happen if I make this thing work on the filter? So on the filter we have to set to the maximum level this frequency CV. It means that I'm controlling at the maximum level the frequency with the control voltage that I send from the ADSR to the VCF. And that's it. Now it's on the sustain phase, so it will be still going as long as I keep the button pressed. And with the sustain level, I can decide how much the filter stays open. Full open. And now when I release, it slowly close because the release time is set a high level. But what if I want a very, very fast response? I will set a very slow attack and a very fast release. While attack, decay and release are times, the sustain level is a fixed voltage that will keep my filter open to a certain frequency that I decide with the sustain. Now let's move to why Platts it's better than this oscillator. I will close the volume on the first input of my mixer, and now I'll go from the macro oscillator, which is Platts, output to the second input of the mixer. To start, you can see that I can switch between different oscillators, but also you can hear that with all this knob I can completely change the sound that comes out. Also you have other oscillators models for percussive sounds. You have also a kick model, a snare model, a hi-hat model. We go through them later, but for now you see that I'm just going out and inside my mixer. Now I want to control the pitch, so I go out from voltage octave here to voltage octave input in my macro oscillator. Again, I can adjust the frequency, and now it's basically working the same way as my previous filter, because I can't control the sound, I can't stop the sound. But what if I connect the trigger input or the level input to my gate output on this MIDI to CV controller? Let's start with the level. Okay, let's raise the volume. I can hear no sound now. What's happening? Oh, what? I can now control the sound, so it sounds when I want. It just have its own release time, decay time, call it whatever you want, and that's so cool. Another thing, if I keep it pressed, notice that I'm in the level input. If I keep it pressed, it keeps playing. So this input, it's made for classical sound, for bass line, for melodies. But what if I want more percussive sound? So I don't want to control the sustain of the sound. I just want to play and then the sound make just a percussion and then stop. For example, because I want to make a kick. Well, in that case, I'll use the trigger input. When I use the trigger input, I have no control on the sustain. So that's why this module can be used by itself without any other module. The example that I did before, I showed you with the VCF, but here I could have put VCA, so an amplifier. So instead of opening a filter, I just had a volume that was controlled by the ADSR. Another thing that I want to show you on this oscillator, on VCV Rack, you need to go here and press Edit LAPG Response Decay. LPG stands for Low Pass Gate, which is a sort of low pass filter that when it receives the gate signal, so when you press the button, it opens up. That's what a low pass gate is. So I can edit the time, so I can decide how long it's the decay on my sound. And this works also in the level mode. Very short, very long. And I can decide if this behaves like a VCF, so a filter. You can see there's a sort of filter that closes, or an amplifier, so a volume that lower down. This is more like a volume. This is more like a filter. It closes. Okay, I can do the same on here just by keeping this button pressed and moving. You can see the LEDs here goes up or down, and for the decay, same thing. Hope you can see it. Okay, you have to keep this pressed. And that's it. So the last thing that I want to show you is the difference between these models, let's call them the green light models, and the red light ones. So the green light are more classical waveforms, and they are made to be used both in the trigger mode or in the level mode. Then if I go out of this mode, I can change the sound. But if you want to use the red, let's say the red modes, you need to use the trigger input, because with the level input, there's no way to make them sound. Almost every one of them. It's better used in the trigger mode, especially if you want to create a kick. Or snares. Or huts. and that's it. So this is way more complex than a simple oscillator, both for the amount of waveforms that it can generate and for the ability of controlling its own sound, the decay of the sound. So you don't have control on the attack, for example, so you can't decide how long it takes the filter to open. If you want to do that, you need to control this sound with an external filter. But for most of the cases, for percussions, for basses, you don't need to control the attack of the bass. I find myself using this module alone on a lot of projects. So if you want to start cheap, this is like 260 euros, I guess, so it's under 300 euros. And it's quite cheap for a module like that, in my opinion. One thing that I want to be very clear about Platz, but about a lot of other modules in general, modular doesn't mean analog. These are two completely different things. Platz is a completely digital module. I think it's 16-bit. So it's very detailed. The sound that it generates, it's very detailed. This sounds so good, but it's not analog. If you want to stay analog, you have to stay with a oscillator like this. You have to buy a very simple oscillator, sine wave, triangle wave, saw wave, square wave. These are analog waveforms. If you want to have this complexity of sounds, you can't go analog. One last thing about Platz, it can be controlled by voltages. You can send voltage to control certain parameters. So basically you can send, for example, an envelope to control this parameter to do something like this and to move as long as you play. So you have modulation, you have your sound changing, and that's what's cool about modular. But we'll talk about modulations and envelope generator in the next video. So guys, this was a longer one and a more complex one. I hope I have been clear in what I said. If I didn't, please ask me questions in the comment. I'm so happy to answer. If you want to see some of the sounds that Platz can make, I have one video called Same Arpeggio, Different Sounds, something like that, in my YouTube channel. I will link that in the description. Thanks for those who bought my sample pack. If you didn't yet, you find the link to the demo and the sample pack in the description. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel if you didn't yet, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers guys, thanks for watching, bye bye.